Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to completely shatter a pretty common misconception. You know that idea that gas station owners are just getting rich off high pump prices? Yeah, we're going to peel back the layers on that today to reveal a fascinating, complex, and honestly incredibly fragile retail reality. If you've ever looked at a super busy station and thought they were just minting money, well, prepare to have your perspective entirely flipped.
Okay, so here's our structured roadmap for today's deep dive. We're going to start with the gas station illusion, look at the 5 very distinct ways to actually own one, explore the surprisingly thin margin of fuel, and then pivot to where the real money is hiding. After that, we'll uncover some terrifying hidden risks buried underground before finally looking at the ultimate retail disguise. Basically, we're going to break down the legal, physical, and financial truths behind that convenience store you pass every single day.
All right, Section 1, the gas station illusion. Because pumping fuel absolutely doesn't mean printing money.
I mean, we all do it, right? You drive past a station, you see those gas prices lit up in giant glowing numbers, you watch a line of cars moving hundreds of gallons an hour, and you just do the math in your head. You naturally assume the owner is swimming in cash. But the gas station you're picturing in your head, the one where money flows as freely as the gasoline, it simply doesn't exist. The crazy truth? The fuel you're buying is almost an afterthought to the people who actually own the place.
To subvert your expectations right out of the gate, consider this number. The national average fuel gross margin is just about 30 to 35 cents a gallon. And remember, that is the gross margin. That's before any operating costs like, labor, electricity, or maintenance are even paid for. Moving on to Section 2, 5 ways to own. Because not all gas station owners actually own the same thing.
Before you even start thinking about profits, you really need to understand that the station you're standing in operates under one of 5 completely different business arrangements. First, you've got the independent owner. They own everything and take maximum risk for maximum control. Then there's the franchise operator. They're paying hefty upfront fees and ongoing royalties just for brand recognition. Third is the corporate-owned station, where the person behind the counter is just a salaried employee. Fourth is the dealer. They lease the building, but they're locked into buying fuel exclusively from their oil company landlord. And finally, you have the lease operator under a triple net lease, paying rent, taxes, and maintenance to a totally hands-off real estate investor. Whether you're an independent owner or a lease operator, your specific arrangement determines exactly how much money you can make. They are fundamentally different businesses operating under the exact same canopy.
And honestly, looking at building a station from the ground up brilliantly illustrates the staggering physical barrier to entry here. If you want to build one, you aren't just buying a cash register. First, you have to buy the land. Then, you're building the physical store and that massive outdoor canopy that has to be engineered for wind and snow. And crucially, this is the big one. You are dropping hundreds of thousands of dollars to bury massive 10,000 to 20,000 gallon double-walled tanks and incredibly complex leak detection sensors beneath the concrete. You are literally buying millions of dollars in heavily regulated underground infrastructure before you even sell your first bag of chips.
So let's get into Section 3, the thin margin of fuel. We're going to follow the dollar all the way from the pump directly into the pocket.
Think about how a typical $3.11 gallon gets sliced up. It completely explains why these margins are so paper thin. Almost 60% of that goes straight to the global crude oil market. Nothing you can do about that. Then, massive state and federal taxes grab about 18%. Refining, processing, and those big truck deliveries eat up another large chunk. By the time all these different hands have dipped into the pot, the station owner is left fighting for absolute pennies.
Furthermore, fuel is one of the most highly transparent commodities on the planet. I mean, you literally see your competitor's price in giant glowing numbers without even getting out of your car. This transparency traps owners in constant brutal price wars. So to survive, they rely on a pricing strategy economists actually call rockets and feathers. It works like this. When wholesale costs rise, retail prices shoot up fast, like a rocket, because a thin margin business simply cannot absorb that loss. But when wholesale costs fall, retail prices drift down slowly, like a feather. Why? Because owners desperately need that time to recoup the margins they bled out during the previous price spike. It's not malicious, it's just basic retail survival.
So here is the really crazy part. Once the owner pays their labor, electricity, and maintenance out of their tiny slice of the pie, their actual net profit is roughly 10 to 15 cents a gallon. Meanwhile, the credit card swipe fee is taking about 8 cents per gallon. That means the bank issuing the Visa or MasterCard earns nearly as much per transaction as the station owner. And the bank is taking absolutely zero physical or environmental risk to get it. No way around it. That is just a wild dynamic.
All right, Section 4, where the money really is. Let's look at the big pivot to inside sales. Let's move to the real moneymaker and see how this business actually survives. Because as it turns out,
Fuel is merely the magnet that gets customers onto the property. According to industry data, while fuel drives nearly 70% of the station's total revenue, it only accounts for about 38% of the profit. Now look at the inside store sales. They represent just 35% of the revenue, but they generate over 60% of the actual gross profit. The math is undeniable here. Over 6 out of every $10 of profit at a typical station comes directly from inside the building.
When you compare that tiny 11% gross margin of fuel against the 30 to 50% margins of inside products, it totally exposes the massive financial gap between the outside and the inside of the station. A bag of chips or a can of soda, that carries a margin of 75% or even more.
But honestly, nothing compares to this. A single cup of brewed coffee costs the station owner, well, it's roughly 23 cents in beans, the cup, and the lid, but it sells for up to $5. That is a gross margin of over 90%. When you actually sit down and do the math on the net profits after swipe fees and operating costs, a single cup of coffee generates more bottom-line profit than a customer pumping 12 whole gallons of gasoline. It's a real game changer for the owner.
And smart operators, they don't stop at coffee. They stack high-margin profit centers wherever they can. An automated car wash regularly exceeds a 50% gross profit margin. ATMs and lottery terminals bring in steady commissions with literally zero inventory required on their part. And modern stations are increasingly adding electric vehicle charging stations. Now, you might be wondering why a gas station wants EV chargers. Well, the appeal isn't just the electricity revenue, it's the dwell time. A customer waiting 30 minutes for a charge is a customer buying a sandwich, grabbing a coffee, and browsing the aisles. Every extra minute a customer spends on the property is another chance to sell them high-margin items.
Okay, Section 5, Hidden Risks Buried Underground, the terrifying expenses of retail fuel.
So before you run out and decide to buy a gas station, we need to bring the tension back a bit and look at the crushing operating expenses. A well-placed mid-sized station might generate nearly $500,000 in monthly revenue. Sounds great, right? But after you deduct the massive wholesale cost of fuel, you're left with about $87,000 in gross profit. Then come the relentless operating expenses. 24/7 labor, the electricity for walk-in coolers running nonstop, credit card fees, and massive debt service. At the end of the month, the net operating income might be just under $11,000. Less than 3 cents of every revenue dollar actually flows to the owner's bottom line. If that store inside wasn't there, the station would literally lose money every month just pumping gas.
And you know, that's just the daily operation. The absolute biggest risk, the one that gives owners those 3 a.m. nightmares, is environmental compliance. Owners must carry pollution liability insurance because of what sits beneath the concrete. The EPA mandates double-walled fiberglass tanks, leak detection sensors, and constant vapor monitoring. If thousands of gallons of flammable liquid leak into the soil or groundwater, the cleanup is entirely the property owner's legal and financial responsibility. And get this, that's true even if the leak started with a previous owner.
With over 54,000 sites in the U.S. still waiting for cleanup right now, a single undetected leak can absolutely ruin a business. The average cleanup cost is around $154,000, but if that fuel reaches the groundwater, we're talking cleanup bills running into the millions. This is exactly why environmental assessments are strictly mandatory before anyone purchases a site. The liability doesn't just disappear. It sits in the ground waiting for someone to pay for it.
Finally, Section 6, a retail disguise, because at the end of the day, it's all about location, volume, and real food.
Ultimately, your ceiling in this business is determined by your location. Daily traffic volume, easy corner access, and surrounding commercial anchors completely dictate your potential, but your daily operation determines how close you actually get to that ceiling. The top stations in America, brands like Wawa and Casey's, they've really cracked the code here. They've invested heavily in real food, made-to-order sandwiches, fresh pizza, and digital ordering kiosks. They've accepted that they are actually in the restaurant business. They're utilizing massive 50 to 60% margins on prepared food to completely transform their financial picture, and they support it all with mobile apps that drive intense customer loyalty.
This single philosophy right here is what separates the struggling operators, the ones sweating over pennies per gallon during a price war, from the highly profitable retail empires. The food is the business, the fuel is the advertisement. That hits the nail on the head.
I really hope this explainer leaves you looking completely differently at your next stop. Look past the pump. Look at the car wash, the EV chargers, the massive coffee station, and all that fresh food. So I leave you with this. Next time you stop to fill up, are you standing at a gas station? Or are you actually standing in a cleverly disguised restaurant that just uses fuel to fill its parking lot? Thanks for joining me today, and keep questioning what's really driving the businesses all around you.